Winter took everything from me before it took my name. By the time the snow started falling sideways across the empty fields, I was already sleeping wherever the wind hurt the least, under loading docks, inside drainage culverts, once even in the hollowed shell of a burned-out farmhouse. The town of Briar Hollow wasn't meant for people like me. It was rural, quiet, the kind of place you only passed through if you were lost or had nowhere else to go. I was both. I ended up there after the last bus dropped me off at a crossroads that didn't even have a gas station. Just a flickering streetlight and a wooden sign half buried in snow. The locals didn't ask questions. They rarely even looked at me. That should have been comforting. Instead, it felt rehearsed. At night, the cold pressed in like a living thing. Snow doesn't fall silently out there. It whispers, scratches, taps against metal and wood like fingers testing doors. I slept near an old grain silo on the edge of town, wrapped in cardboard and regret, telling myself I'd leave once the storm passed. But storms kept coming. That's when I noticed the trucks. They came only after midnight, long after the town went dark. No logos. No plates I could see. They moved slow, deliberate, their headlights off until the very last second. They turned down a dirt road that wasn't marked on any map I'd ever seen. The road led past fields no one farmed anymore, toward the hills where radio reception died. The first time I asked about it, I asked the wrong person. The woman at the diner froze mid-pour, coffee sloshing over the rim. She didn't answer. Just wiped the counter again and again until I stopped talking. Another man leaned over and told me, quietly, that winter wasn't a good time to wander. People were disappearing too. Not the kind that made the news. People like me. A man named Carl who slept near the river. A woman everyone called Red because of her scarf. Their camp stayed behind, untouched, like they just stepped away. But they never came back. One night, desperation beat fear. The temperature dropped so fast my breath hurt. I followed the trucks. The dirt road led to a chain-link fence sunk deep into the frozen ground. No signs. No warnings. Just a low hum coming from beneath the earth, like machinery breathing. There were buildings too, flat, windowless structures painted the color of dirty snow. Lights glowed faintly through vents. I didn't get close. I didn't need to. I saw enough. Men in heavy coats unloaded crates. Not food. Not supplies. They were careful in a way that felt wrong, like one mistake could end everything. A guard stood watch, his eyes scanning the darkness, not for threats, but for witnesses. I backed away slowly, my heart louder than my footsteps. A branch snapped. The guard turned his head. I ran. I didn't stop until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I hid beneath an abandoned trailer, shaking, not just from the cold. From the certainty that Briar Hollow wasn't ignoring the homeless. It was erasing them. After that night, the town changed. Or maybe I did. Every sound felt closer. Every shadow lingered longer than it should. The trucks still came, but less often. Or maybe I just stopped seeing them. I tried to leave. The road out was buried under snowdrifts taller than me, and no cars stopped anymore. Even hitchhiking felt pointless when drivers refused to make eye contact. I was trapped by winter and something far worse. A week later, I found Carl's jacket near the fence line. Folded neatly. Clean. Like it had been returned. That's when I understood the rules. Don't ask. Don't follow. Don't survive too long. The nights grew colder. My fingers went numb so often I stopped trusting them. I dreamed of warmth and woke up convinced I'd lost my legs. Once, I woke to footprints circling my camp, perfectly spaced, methodical. Not animal. Not human in any way I recognized. I started writing things down on scraps of paper. Names. Dates. What little I knew. If I didn't make it, maybe someone else would. The fence was gone by February. Not broken. Removed. The buildings too. Just empty land and snow smooth flat, like it had never been touched. The dirt road ended in a dead field. No tracks. No tire marks. Nothing. The town pretended nothing had changed. The diner closed early. The post office stopped delivering. People stayed inside. And the homeless, what few of us were left, kept dying or disappearing. I survived by luck or by mistake. One morning, a state truck arrived unannounced. Emergency housing relocation, they said. Weather-related. No paperwork. No questions. They put me on a bus with tinted windows and drove for hours. When I asked where we were going, no one answered. I was dropped off in a city shelter before dawn. Warm. Crowded. Safe. Too safe. Spring came and went. I found work. A room. A door that locked. But some nights, when the temperature dips just enough, I hear that hum again, in my walls, in my bones. I tried looking up Briar Hollow later. The town still exists. On paper. But the population hasn't changed in years. No records of deaths. No missing persons. No reports. Just a blank space where people like me vanished. I don't know what was under those fields. I don't know who ran it, or why winter mattered so much. Maybe cold made people quieter. Easier to erase. All I know is this: if you ever find yourself stranded in a rural town during winter, and the locals won't meet your eyes, don't wait for shelter. Leave immediately. Because some places don't let witnesses survive the snow. I didn't plan to become homeless. It happened the quiet way most disasters do, through long arguments, slammed doors, and parents who loved me but didn't know how to stop controlling every decision I made. After one last fight about college applications and money, I packed my car and drove until the road narrowed into farmland and trees. When the gas ran low, I parked near an old rural campground that looked abandoned except for a few fire rings and a rusted sign warning about wildlife. I slept there most nights, wrapped in blankets, pretending it was temporary. That's where I met her. She appeared one evening while I was cooking instant noodles over a small camp stove. A young woman, maybe my age, thin and pale, wearing a jacket that looked too big for her. She didn't ask for food at first. She just watched me from the tree line like she was making sure I was real. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded practiced, like she'd rehearsed normal conversation and forgotten half of it. She told me she was living in the woods. Said the town nearby wasn't safe anymore. I assumed drugs or trauma and didn't press. We sat by the fire, and she warned me about the abandoned farmhouse up the dirt road, the one with the collapsed porch and boarded windows. Don't go inside, she said. They don't like witnesses. I laughed, nervous, and asked who they were. She didn't answer. Instead, she asked about my parents. When I told her, her eyes sharpened in a way that made my stomach tighten. They ever work for the county? She asked. Or anything classified? I said no. At least I thought no. Over the next week, she came back every night. Sometimes she brought canned food. Sometimes she brought nothing and just talked. She never gave me her real name. She told me she'd escaped something but couldn't say what because it was still running. She carried a backpack stuffed with notebooks, always kept close, even while sleeping. One night, I asked to see them. Her hands started shaking immediately. If you read them, she said, you'll be involved. I wish I'd listened. The next morning, her campsite was empty. No backpack. No footprints. Just a burned-out fire pit and the feeling that something had gone wrong while I slept. I waited all day. She never came back. By sunset, curiosity beat fear. I followed the dirt road to the farmhouse, telling myself I'd only look from the outside. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled like mold and old paper. Beneath a loose floorboard, I found notebooks sealed in plastic, filled with diagrams, dates, and names crossed out in red. One name matched my mother's maiden name. That's when I realized running away hadn't taken me far enough. I read the notebooks over the next 2 nights, hunched in my car with a flashlight, jumping at every sound. They weren't diaries. They were logs, observations written by multiple hands over decades. Pages described temporary housing initiatives in rural areas, camps designed to attract people with nowhere else to go. There were notes about behavioral testing, surveillance without consent, and relocation procedures that never explained where anyone went. Some entries were signed only with initials. Others were stamped with a faded county seal. The young woman's handwriting appeared later in the notebooks, panicked, rushed, accusing. She wrote about pretending to comply, about copying documents, about running when she realized participants weren't being released. The last page simply read, "If I disappear, it means they found me again." That night, I called my parents. At first, they were just relieved to hear my voice. But when I mentioned the campground, the farmhouse, and the notebooks, the relief drained out of the conversation. My father told me to leave immediately. My mother begged me to come home and said I was confused. When I pressed them, there was a long silence. Finally, my mom admitted they'd both worked on a rural outreach program years ago. She said it started with good intentions. She said they were told the data was anonymous. When I asked about disappearances, she told me to stop asking questions if I wanted to stay safe. The next morning, county trucks appeared near the campground. Men in plain clothes walked the area, taking photos, measuring distances. By the time I reached the farmhouse again, it was surrounded by caution tape. The floorboards were gone. The notebooks were gone. So was the campsite. No police report. No missing person notice. Just a quiet cleanup like nothing had ever been there. I left that day and went home. My parents acted like everything was normal, but they avoided my eyes. The farmhouse burned down a month later due to electrical issues. The campground was permanently closed. Sometimes I still find loose pages in my belongings, notes I don't remember taking, diagrams I don't understand. And sometimes, when I camp now, I wake up certain someone was standing just beyond the firelight, making sure I stayed where they could find me again. The mystery was never meant to be solved, only continued. By the time winter settled over the county like a lid, I had already learned how to disappear. I was 23, living out of my car, and drifting between rural towns that barely acknowledged each other's existence. Snow made it easier. Fewer people outside. Fewer questions. I parked where barns sagged under their own age and fields stretched empty and white, convincing myself that isolation was safer than cities. That's when I first saw the vanity van. It was parked at the edge of a frozen cornfield just off Route 17, its white exterior unnaturally clean for a back road coated in slush. The engine was off, but the interior glowed faintly through curtained windows. I noticed the mirrors first, dozens of them, mounted along the inside walls, reflecting soft yellow light. It looked less like a vehicle and more like a traveling dressing room abandoned in the cold. I didn't approach it. I never approached anything anymore. I slept in my car that night a mile down the road, wedged between a broken fence and a tree line. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of a low hum, steady and mechanical. Not a generator, something deeper. I sat up and watched headlights sweep across the snow as the vanity van rolled past without sound, tires leaving no visible tracks. The next morning, the field was empty. No van. No marks. Just smooth snow like it had never been disturbed. Over the next few weeks, the van kept appearing. Always at night. Always somewhere isolated, near an abandoned church, behind a shuttered feed store, once beside a frozen creek where the ice looked freshly broken. I started noticing other things too. Extension cords vanishing into the ground. Temporary structures that were gone by sunrise. Locals who stopped talking the moment I entered diners or gas stations. I asked an older woman once if she'd seen the van. She stared at me for a long moment, then said, "Winter makes people see things," and turned away. People like me, homeless, transient, were easy to ignore. Or erase. I noticed camps abandoned overnight. A young guy named Mason who slept near the quarry never came back after a snowstorm. His tarp was folded neatly. His boots were gone. No one asked about him. One night, curiosity beat fear. I followed the vanity van. It turned off the main road and into a service path I swear hadn't existed the day before. The snow along it was darker, melted in patches. The hum grew louder as I crept closer on foot, my breath shallow, my hands numb. Beyond a stand of trees, the land dipped, revealing lights buried low, structures half sunk into the ground, vents exhaling warm air into the freezing night. The vanity van was parked at the center. The doors were open. Inside, the mirrors reflected not people, but movement, shadows passing through spaces that shouldn't have existed. Tables lined with equipment. Crates marked with numbers instead of names. I heard voices, calm and professional, discussing schedules and relocations. I stepped back. A hand brushed my shoulder. I ran. I didn't stop until my lungs burned and my vision blurred. I slept in my car with the engine running, terrified to shut it off, convinced the hum would find me again. Because now I knew the truth. The van wasn't wandering. It was collecting. After that night, I stopped sleeping deeply. Every sound snapped me awake. Wind in the trees sounded like footsteps. Passing headlights felt intentional. The vanity van still appeared, but farther away, as if it knew I was watching. Or as if it was watching me. Snowstorms erased roads and excuses. I tried leaving twice. Both times, my GPS failed, and I ended up circling back to the same stretch of highway. Locals began locking their doors earlier. Gas stations closed before sunset. And the number of homeless people I saw dropped to almost zero. One morning, I found Mason's jacket hanging from a fence post near the quarry. Clean. Mended. Like someone wanted it seen. I started documenting everything in a notebook: dates, locations, sketches of the van and the underground lights. I hid the notebook beneath my spare tire, terrified that if it was found, I'd vanish like the others. The vanity van appeared one last time in late February. This time, it parked beside me. I woke to the hum vibrating through my car frame. Frost traced the inside of my windows. When I looked up, the van's side door was open, lights spilling across the snow. Inside, the mirrors reflected my headlights back at me, multiplied, distorted. A woman stood in the doorway. She looked normal. Clipboard. Winter coat. Friendly expression. She said my name. I don't know how she knew it. She told me they could help. Warmth. Work. A place where winter didn't matter. She said people like me fell through cracks, and their organization existed to recover assets society abandoned. Behind her, I saw movement, figures stepping into mirrored rooms, their reflections lagging a second behind their bodies. I shook my head. She sighed, disappointed, and stepped back. The door closed without a sound. The hum stopped. The van drove away, finally leaving tracks that vanished before my eyes. By morning, the land was empty again. Spring came slowly. Snow melted. Roads reappeared. I managed to leave the county when a highway reopened. I found a shelter, then a job, then a room with a lock. I tried reporting what I'd seen. No records. No missing vans. No permits. No reports of underground structures. The towns denied everything. The notebook vanished from my car one night without signs of forced entry. Sometimes, when winter creeps back in and the power hums too steadily, I think about the mirrors. About how reflections can lie. About how easy it is to step into warmth when you've been cold too long. I survived because I ran. Others didn't. And somewhere out there, on roads that don't exist until you need them, the vanity van is still driving, quiet, patient, and waiting for winter to do the rest.